Why secrets matter. I've kept my weirdest secrets my entire life, and now, finally, that I'm well over 60, one sec. I've survived breast cancer so far, so living with terminal illness gives you a certain a radical shift in your outlook about, oh my God, I'm looking at myself instead of you. My apologies. My life journey, and especially recently on TikTok, has taught me that there are a lot of people with their cultural roots in the forest and mountains, and that are also bound by the same cultural laws of secrecy as I am. And the reason for that was because to tell on us, to tell the truth about us, meant our certain persecution and death. We had to lie about ourselves. We had to pretend so that the actual pretenders would not seek us out, destroy us, invalidate and victimize us for our uncanny perception and instant knowing. So how did the bridge open up for me between this world and the Fey world? Well, I really honestly always guess at how old I was, but I do know this. My cousins and I were in the coulees of the Badlands. The Badlands are sheer sand cliffs that are eroded by wind, a feature left over from the Ice Age, apparently. I'm not a geological specialist by any stretch of the imagination, but once our chores were done, we were not expected to be seen again until supper time. So, of course, we could go home for lunch, like, don't be silly, but if we didn't, nobody really cared. And because there was a pack of us, we were considered safe. But there was one solid rule that Granny and my Aunt Dottie had for us. And that was that we could not cross the small creek into this very small, I don't know, maybe 1 to 5 acre patch of forest on the other side of the creek. We had to stay on the dry side in the Badlands where nothing grew but interesting wildflowers like brown-eyed Susies and cacti, land of the mountain lion. And what else did we have? Early on, we had rattlesnakes, coyotes, deer. That's the only things I ever saw. One morning after chores on a hot summer day, we all went down into the coulee and we went to the creek. What kid wouldn't want to go to the cold water on a hot morning? And when we got to the creek, we saw that there was a tree fallen from a recent storm. First time any of us had seen that. And it was a natural bridge, of course, to the other side. And my cousins knew their mother better than me, and they refused to cross the log. But I told them I was just going to pop over and pop right back. So I balanced my way across the log on my little feet. I remember I was wearing cheap white canvas runners. I can see my toes. But I got to the other side of the creek, and I don't know, looked like a normal little patch of forest for me because I lived on the opposite side of the prairies, nearer to the mountains. So there was no surprise to me inside that little forest, except it was green and it was cool. And I remember the sunlight prisming through the leaves. That was beautiful. I remember the smell, that smell of wet poplar. I love it. Wet aspen. sound of the leaves clicking like dry bones. And, because there was nothing special going on, I turned around and walked back across the log, but all my cousins, Bobby Lynn, Karen Agnes, and Mary Jean, had evaporated. They were gone. I started to walk home. And the first thing I really noticed was that the sun was on the opposite side of the coulee from where it had been in the morning when we went down. That scared me a little bit. Something was off. So I started to walk up the coulee, but it was that time of day when a little teeny girl, 3.5 feet tall, suddenly has a shadow that's 7 feet tall. And my shadow was out in front of me, kind of slanted off to my right-hand side. And all of a sudden I heard the high shriek and scream, the whistle of a white-headed eagle, and its wingspan, like its shadow, to a child of however old I was, like between probably 6 and 8, 5 and 7. I was in tears. I started running, my little feet, my little skinny legs just pumping, running straight up that coulee for home. And all of a sudden I could hear pounding hooves. Ba-boom, 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 ba-da-da-da. It was coming up behind me like thunder, and all of a sudden an arm came down around me, and I was thrown up across my belly, across in front of the horn on a saddle. I knew it was my Uncle Bobby. And he rode me for home, swung me up, sat me on the saddle in front of him, and we galloped for home. I remember him saying something about how sad and scared my aunt was. But what I thought was 15 seconds on the other side of that creek had been nearly a 12-hour day. The sun was going down. That's why it was on that side of the coulee. When we'd gone down there, the sun had been not even halfway to noon on the east side. And there was, I've never told this story except to very few people very privately, but there was always talk. Like you could hear Granny talking and Auntie talking and things that were different about me when I came home. I was in my 40s when my mother bellowed at me one day that she wished I'd quit dyeing my hair and wearing colored contact lenses. I looked at her and I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you're blonde," and my hair was at that time naturally almost black, and my eyes were green, still are green, and she said, "And you have blue eyes." And I'm like, this is my own mother. So this whole sense of having changed after that day lived on with me, and it was a dirty secret, a shameful secret, and I never understood why until I went to university and started to learn about the history of our people. But I just want anybody out there carrying those secrets to start sharing them. We don't have to run and hide anymore. We're just okay as we are. Love you, Faye.